Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Insightful Leader Live. I'm your host, Rob Mitchum, the editor-in-chief of Kellogg Insight. And I'm here today with Kellogg professors Matthew Groh, Julio Attino, and Brian Uzzi to talk about the Smart AI Adoption Playbook for Organizations. Before we begin, just a few housekeeping notes. The Insightful Leader Live is brought to you by Kellogg Insights, which is the digital magazine for research and ideas from faculty at the Kellogg School of Management. At insights.kellogg.northwestern.edu, you can find tons of articles, podcasts, webinars like this one on a broad variety of topics in business and leadership, so please check it out. This is our final webinar of 2025, but we're already hard at work booking our 2026 lineup. So if you'd like to hear about those events first, the best way is to sign up for the Kellogg Insight newsletter. There should be a link in the chat right about now to do that. You can also go to our website, find plenty of places to sign up for it. Speaking of the chat, we're going to be closing it momentarily to our attendees, and we ask that if you have a question for today's speakers, please use the Q&A button in your Zoom app. You can also turn on closed captioning if you prefer, using the live transcript function in Zoom. And finally, if you have to leave early, don't worry, we got you. We're recording the session today. We will send out that video link to everyone who registered early next week sometime. Okay, that's all of our housekeeping. So I will move on to introducing our three esteemed guests today. Starting with, on the far side of the table from me, Matthew Groh. Matt is an assistant professor of management and organizations at Kellogg, whose research examines the dynamics of human-AI collaboration in areas such as deepfake detection, medical diagnosis, and empathic communication. Fun fact, Matt and Insight did a story on how to detect AI-generated photos, and it's our #1 most read story on Insight this year, so thank you for that, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Between the two of us is Julio Attino, who is the distinguished Robert R. McCormick Institute professor and former dean of the McCormick School of Engineering and Applied Science, as well as a professor of management and organizations at Kellogg. Attino is an engineering scientist known for his research in chaos and complex systems, and a scholar on the convergence of art, technology, and science. Thank you for joining us, Julio.
Thank you, Rob.
And then joining us remotely is Professor Brian Uzzi, who is Richard L. Thomas Professor of Leadership and Organizational Change at Kellogg and co-director of the Ryan Institute on Complexity. Brian's work focuses on the link between social networks and human achievement and the role of AI in mind and machine partnerships. So we have the best panel possible for today's conversation, I think. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you, Brian. All right, so to begin, I think it's safe to say we're past the phase where companies are asking, should I use AI? And moving into the phase of what should I use AI for? So there's lots of frameworks out there for different fields, different types of organizations. Our Kellogg colleague, Jim Lisinski, has a framework called the 3 A's of AI for marketing. Another colleague, Hatim Rahman, has a framework on how AI affects inequality in the workplace. So I wanted to start with Brian. Talk about the playbook. What's different about it, and what challenges were you trying to address by putting it together?
Okay, sounds great, Rob. Before I begin, though, if we have any Kellogg students out there or former students, you may recognize the background. I'm downtown in Wiebold Hall, zooming into you. My colleagues are in the fancy studio back at the hub. Nonetheless, what about the framework? Well, I'd say look at it in the following way. There's basically two types of frameworks that I've observed as I look across the literature. There's the how-to framework, which tends to be very focused on, here is a specific AI tool that you could implement to get a specific outcome. That could be using natural language processing to analyze your socials. It could be, how do you use image processing to better detect anomalies in someone's image, health image. Or it could be putting sensors in your product so that you know when they might need to be replaced. It's very focused and somewhat narrow, but you get an outcome that you want. Now, that framework I've heard lots of people try to adopt, and it has its value, but we wanted to develop something where we felt that there was a hole in the literature and how people are thinking about things. Why? Because when people use the first framework, they're often worried that they're missing something. They don't know about what else might be out there. Where does the terrain of applications of AI that I might be able to use. And in doing that, I could begin to better understand of all the things out there. Don't just choose maybe the one thing, but think about a strategy for integrating AI into numerous functions that can align and complement one another. And people feel this way because, like right now, I think we all sense everything you said about AI, but also that we've basically only just scratched the surface of kind of the capabilities of large language models. And we don't want to narrow our focus too early. So Julio and Matt and I developed a strategic framework that really helps companies understand what are the ways in which AI could be applied throughout their organization to begin to develop integrated strategies for integrating AI into the DNA of the firm. And not just for very narrow specific things, which are always important and are a great basis for AI, but really thinking about what's at the very top of your destination with AI, which is really about these mind plus machine partnerships. How do you get a fusion between the best of the machine and the best of your human minds? And in that sense, I think that's where our approach is quite different and really distinctive in that it's at the level of strategy.
Excellent. Thank you, Brian. Matt, so the playbook is organized into 3 levels, 3 topics that we're going to dig into over the course of the hour today. Can you briefly introduce those topics and say a little bit about what they are?
Sure. So as Rob was saying, the playbook's organized into 3 topics, or 3 levels, I like to think about it. And in these 3 levels, what we're really doing is coming up with a way for you to think about thinking. So it's metacognition. That's the academic nerd word for it. But thinking about thinking, and at the very first level is automation. So it's how AI can just do stuff for you without any supervision. And that's often what many people think about it. And we can talk about examples in a moment, but I want to give you like the 3-level framework. The next level is answers. So AI can give you, large language models can give you answers to questions you have, but you might need to verify it in some way. Because as we know, hallucination is a big problem. Verification could be that you double check a link, that link actually exists or the reference actually exists, or it might be verification because you have some kind of expertise that aligns with in some way. But that's answers. And that is going to not be as autonomous as automation is. Mm-hmm. But the highest level where we think there's the most value strategically is actually in this idea of advice. So it's automation, answers, and advice. And advice is all about how AI can help us think through solving a problem. And so what that means is AI can actually help us solve problems more effectively, creatively, thoughtfully. The question is often how, and we're going to discuss that today. But our categories are really automation, answers, and advice.
Got it. And then Julio, you joined this collaboration and added sort of a parallel framework to those levels. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, so at the end of the day, what the framework tells you is what things to do. As Matt said, the question that everybody wants to know is how, but there is a higher level. So when I think of leadership, I think in 3 levels also: vision, communication, execution. So the biggest question is why, if you are going big, why you should do it, and then communicate why is that you need to do it in some way, and eventually there are lots of layers where the implementation of those ideas come through. Mm-hmm. But the idea of having these 3 levels is really interesting because once you have the 3 levels, you can pick a whole bunch of industries and come up with a 1-word description for those 3 levels. So for example, healthcare could be automation scheduling, pick one. Answers could be diagnostics. Advice will be treatment planning. Manufacturing could be, the first one could be quality control. The second one could be troubleshooting. The third one could be process optimization. Education, for example, the business that we're in could be, first one, grading assignments, attendance tracking, routine stuff. The answer could be more curriculum resource discovery, training individual path for education identification for different people. And then at the highest level would be pedagogical, different approaches, different courses. But for the same thing, you could think of even real estate. Could be property listing updates, tenant screening, the first level. The second one could be market valuation estimates, zoning regulations. The third one could be anything that has to do with diversification of the portfolio that you have, or development opportunities assessments. Hospitality could be, just pick the last one, reservation management, housekeeping, scheduling. That will be the easiest one. The answer could be guest preference analysis or pricing optimization data. And the last one would be service experience design, brand differentiation strategy. So you go from the easiest things to the most advanced things. So basically, what we are talking is about, I think there are two levels in here. Using AI, which is to working with AI. Mm-hmm. If you work with AI, you will be made more effective. If you think of using AI, so I presume that most people who are watching us now are in the category of working with AI. You will be made more effective if you start outsourcing your thinking, because you use AI, increasingly you'll become dumber and dumber, in my view.
Okay? And we'll return to that as we're talking about sort of the pros and cons of the AI debate. Brian, I want to go back to you to dig into this automation layer, the first layer of the playbook. And I think, as Julio mentioned, this is what I think people have a good grasp on now. People have used AI to write an email. People may be using Zoom right now to summarize this conversation. There are a lot of automated tasks you can do. So tell me, how do you talk about it in the playbook, and what should organizations really be looking for on this automation level?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right about that. There's a myriad of applications for automation. And it's basically about letting AI do it for you. And it forms the basic level because there's some automation in every level. But at the bottom level, it's full on automation. And it's basically this idea that it's where you might want to look first to introduce AI into your organization and create that automation level. Why? Because lots of automation is basically reproducing systems and processes and workflows that you already understand how it's done. So it's not like you're creating a new workflow. You're really looking to replace the workflow you have now with automation. And when you do that, you free up time and resources for other productive activities. The other reason why it's a good place to start is we're still in a phase with AI where the implementation of it is often followed by the question of, how do I know it works? How do I know it's improved my efficacy? Well, if you put it side by side with a process you're already using, you could know, using the same measures you currently have, whether automation is producing the outcome you want. And so automation becomes probably the most direct way to think about putting AI into your organization to begin with, and have it mimic workflows that are already there and your KPIs that go along with those to see how AI could improve that. And that might include responding to emails. It might include processing at a law firm, the intake of new briefs, and so on and so forth. So AI and automation go hand in hand at that very basic level.
Great. So there are a lot of examples that I think our viewers will be familiar with, that we're all familiar with automating using AI. But what are some innovative examples that you've seen, some like the stretch cases for this level?
Sure. So I think maybe the first three that come off my mind are coding, persuasion, and I'll give you like one stretch real world example of medical scribes. And so coding, maybe a lot of people have heard about this, where AI is actually very good at coding, but I want to give some of the facts that we see that Andy Jassy, for example, CEO of Amazon, is talking about. He says they're getting right now $250 million of annualized savings because their engineers can now do all the refactoring, all the kind of boring code stuff to keep up databases, not to create new products, but to just make sure that the current products that you have stay up to date with changing technology. That would often take, let's say, 50 days to do certain specific tasks. That goes to 5 hours. And so because that happens for many employees over, they essentially estimate $250 million annualized savings. So that's one version at a large organization scale. But also coding happens at the vibe coding level. So vibe coding is this cool term created by Andrej Karpathy, great AI influencer. He was also responsible for initial self-driving car stuff happening at Tesla and another founder of OpenAI. But what he kind of first got colloquially known for with respect to vibe coding was something that now MBA students are doing all the time. You can literally just go into Claude or Gemini right now, ask to build an app, and it will build an app for you. So I've recently built some interactive exercises for my MBA students, just going back and forth, having these interactions. And then what I have is actually software that I can deploy on a new system that can do an exercise around reinforcement learning and how to balance exploration and exploitation. So that's coding. That's one example, okay? Persuasion, this is another, I think this is kind of crazy because usually we don't think that we're gonna be persuaded by an AI to do something we wouldn't otherwise do. Last year, a colleague of mine, a former advisor when I was at MIT, he published with his colleagues a paper in Science around how ChatGPT can convince people who believe in conspiracy theories to no longer believe in conspiracy theories. Okay, and so they essentially find that not everyone changes their opinion, but there's essentially about a 10 to 15% drop of people who, after this conversation with, it's not just ChatGPT by itself, they put in thoughtful prompts, so there is some design oriented around this. But by having thoughtful prompts with ChatGPT, you can actually convince people to change their opinions. And why is that? Is it because they're using manipulative personal information or emotional messaging? No. It's about cold, hard logic, offering facts upon facts upon facts, and being tireless. And often, Thanksgiving's coming up next week. I don't know if anyone on this audience has an uncle like maybe I do, where they, sometimes share these ideas. You're too tired to ever debate against them enough to convince them to change their opinion. AI doesn't tire. So that's one area, and I say that because companies are using that persuasive tactic to make sales. So Sierra AI is a customer service company, they're an AI company that has a customer service bot that is in a lot of places right now. An example of that is it's in a lot of flower stores. So when you're ordering flowers for Valentine's Day or Mother's Day or whatever day you might order flowers for your partner's birthday or something like that, you might be interacting with a chat agent. And that chat agent is now upselling you and sees your order history, knows the kind of things you do, and based on that, it can, essentially get a little bit more money for that flower company and also get money for Sierra AI. So just an effective use case, and many organizations can be thinking about this. And the last one I want to talk about was this scribe. So scribe is a profession. There's an old profession of being a scribe, but today there's a medical scribe profession, and that's really important for getting clinical notes because when you're talking with a doctor, maybe you as a patient don't know all the medical terms, but the doctor is using very precise medical terms, and actually translating that to text requires a lot of knowledge. Turns out that companies like Abridge, now valued at $5.2 billion, or companies like Mobius, which is a smaller startup in that space, but also doing really awesome work, can actually just come in, allow doctors to focus just on the diagnosis and the interaction and the treatment plan, and not have anyone else in the room. So it cuts costs a little bit, but more than that, it actually organizes information in a better way than it's ever been done before, so then you can track your patients more effectively. And then on top of that, hospitals can identify trends that weren't as easy to identify before, or at least that's possible. I don't know that is yet being done, but there's just so many opportunities with just this base of automation.
Yeah. As someone who is married to a physician, I have seen this firsthand as a way AI is improving quality of life and quality of work. So, yeah, absolutely see that. Julio, so the idea of communicating the vision for AI within an organization, automation isn't so simple maybe, because on one hand, it's providing some early wins that show the value of the technology, but it's also where a lot of people's fears around AI are, I think. Like, will AI replace me? Will it take my job? So how does an organization balance that? How do they emphasize the positives without bringing up the negatives?
I think you have to demonstrate the value of AI, and obviously AI will replace some things. The best scenario is where maybe medical diagnostics is one, where the combination AI-human is still better. But there is no question that AI at the level of automation will replace people, okay? I think at the other extreme, I would say that I don't know if there is a single best example of a company that is completely AI driven, or the vision of that company couldn't have happened without AI, something that is uniquely AI. But if you are sitting in any organization, I think at the other level you have to think how AI can reshape the entire industry value creation. What new capabilities could appear that could give you, but everybody thinking about this, competitive advantage. How can you implement human machine AI collaborations that would increase value to what you are doing? But the value in articulating the things has to be, I thought leadership is vision, communication, then execution. They are all complicated, okay? And you better be good in two of these, okay? But you can be the person with a vision, but you need help with the communication, or vice versa. You could be the one who encapsulates a vision, can put it out there, but is fantastic in communicating, persuading the idea. By the way, when I think of vision, communication, execution, I think of Steve Jobs. Amazing at 3 levels, okay? Vision, wow. Communication, the guy could have been the leader of a religious cult. And execution, paranoid about every minute detail. So, yeah, there are problems at the 3 levels, but if you start at the level of automation, there is no question that if you start putting AI-driven robots in a warehouse in Amazon, you will need less people. And the question is, can you assimilate those people into higher level activities, less boring, less routine? But this is where communication becomes an art, because you have to kind of present a case that may not be wholly positive for everybody.
Right. Great. Well, let's move up a level to the second section, which is answers. So going back to Brian, I think this is an area where people are starting to understand using AI to find answers to things. But I guess maybe the skeptic's point of view is, how is AI better than using the internet, using a search engine, or even better than just the way humans have done research for centuries? So talk a little bit about where you're thinking of this.
Yeah, exactly. So advice is really about having AI find it for you. Automation is do it for you. Advice is find it for you. And advice is usually some kind of integration, a distillation of different points of view in a cohesive way. And that's the way that many people use advice. So you just mentioned, searching the web. I could ask a large language model to tell me about something. How much is the price of the foundation of a home that needs to be 15 feet above ground level? And I might spend an hour looking at different websites trying to integrate all that information. AI does some of that integration for me, and that is advice, and that is very powerful.
Brian, can I stop you 1 second? I think what you mean to say is it's answers, but I think sometimes it's complicated because we have this automation answers advice framework, and then the A's get all tripped up. But I think
I'm sorry, answers. Yeah, I'm sorry. We're talking about answers. Thank you, Matt.
no worries. I
So yeah, exactly. Answers about finding it for you. Now, with all that said,
But
there's another layer to answers that is so valuable. So let me share a piece of research that I'm doing with Matt. And what we're doing is we're looking for answers to group interaction and performance. Now, for a very long time, social scientists have, given us different ways to look at teams to know whether the team's going to be performing well or not. So communication between the leader and someone in the room, body language, tone of voice. But as humans, we're very limited. We could look at one of those things at a time, maybe just the body language of someone else in the room. But we know that everybody else in the room has got some body language going on. The machine could give us answers simultaneously about the body language of everybody in the room, because that answers the answer is out there. We can't necessarily acquire it ourselves, but with the aid of the machine, we can learn so much more about a group. Think about it this way as a simple analogy. Maybe you're watching a soccer game and your eye is focusing on the person dribbling the ball. That's all you could basically do. But you have a sense that the position and movement of everybody else on the field is contributing to how well the team is performing. AI can give you an answer to everything. So it does not only search quickly, as you might have said, but it also allows us to collect much more information simultaneously to get a comprehensive picture of the world around us and potentially fill in more blind spots all at the same time.
So, Brian, I thought when you started with the example, you are going to go through the exercise that you had to do with your house being destroyed in Florida.
Sure, I could talk about that. That's also a great way to think about answers. So I had a house in Florida, got destroyed last year in the hurricane. And I had to look into, could I rebuild it? And basically, I had to find someone who could give me an estimate to create a foundation that would stand 15 feet above the ground. I called engineers for weeks. Nobody had time to talk to me. I finally got one that would talk to me, told me he couldn't give me an answer for 2 months. So I basically gave a lot of textual information to a chatbot, and it came back with a detailed engineering estimate. The answer was out there, and ChatGPT helped me find it. And in the end, what ChatGPT gave me astonished me because it was pretty close to what the engineer gave me 2 months later for a very high price. So that's another aspect of finding answers. And that's why that second level can become so powerful, because it's not just about finding things more quickly that we know exist, but it's about finding things that we don't know exist, but have a sense is out there. We just don't know how to capture it.
That's a great example, Brian. Thank you. Matt, you brought this up in the introduction that AI, while these uses sound great, AI kind of has a reliability problem currently, where it can be wrong. It can hallucinate fictitious facts out of whole cloth. So how do organizations deal with that? And are there organizations that are finding a way to work with that and still, reveal this capability?
Okay, love the question. And I should baseline this with humans are also infallible, right? Humans are often wrong, but we're often wrong in slightly different ways. Maybe someone lied because there was an incentive incompatibility kind of issue. Maybe someone made a mistake because they didn't have enough time to think through the problem. Maybe there's a number of different kind of things. But there's a lot of mistakes that no human would make that a large language model or an AI system might make. And so that's the kind of errors that we want to avoid, right? And so we're already seeing with like self-driving cars. Self-driving cars are on average way better drivers than people. But you could never imagine that like maybe somehow the self-driving car system all got hacked at once and then all cars turned left at once. That would never kind of happen to humans because we're just like not built in that kind of way that we're all going to turn left at 12 o'clock, you know? So that's like one thing to think about some of these differences. But I like to think about the medical space because the medical space is where there's really high stakes, and a lot of times AI is actually outperforming doctors. I'm not saying that we need to substitute doctors for AI. And in fact, like because it's so high stakes and we don't know when AI is going to make the error, we don't want to substitute doctors for AI. But because AI is often getting things right, and I'm thinking about like just in the last year, there's been lots of really well-respected science journals publishing papers, often by companies, like authors from companies at Microsoft or Google, showing that on really challenging medical questions, AI systems are able to answer it. And answer it actually at less cost, like all the kind of labs and tests that you'd have to order to diagnose the patient, than physicians would be. And it could be that they're like twice or triple as accurate and way, way less costly, these AI systems. And in my own research, I've done stuff in skin disease, specifically diagnosing skin disease and looking at how doctors compare to dermatologists and also primary care physicians. We see a lot of examples where AI systems can actually beat the physicians. But then the thing is, there's often these blind spots. And then so what we have current research that's trying to map what's a physician blind spot look like, what's an AI blind spot. And if you can combine the two, then you can make a complementary system that actually gets the best of both worlds. But if you don't do that, then you get in the situation of, well, the doctor doesn't know when to take the advice or ignore the advice. And if the doctor just thinks they're always right, then you're going to lose all the upside of AI. If the doctor is unsure themselves, then you're going to get the upside of the AI, but you're not going to get the instances where things went wrong. What's really nice, though, is if you have expertise, that means there's some verifiability built into this like answering system. And so when you're given some skin disease and then the AI suggestion of the diagnosis is X, you might have thought, well, I never would have considered X, but I can't rule that out. And since I can't rule that out, I'm going to include that. And so basically it expands often our thinking. And so where otherwise you would have said, oh, it's for sure atopic dermatitis or some specific thing, you're like, well, I didn't, there's thousands of skin diseases. I didn't think about this one, but now I can consider it. And by expanding our thinking like that, it allows us as humans, experts in whatever domain, to go down another rabbit hole, see if that maybe matters for this situation. And if it does, then bring it to bear. And so I think this can be really helpful for just expanding the way people are thinking.
Mm-hmm. So more of an alternate point of view instead of a source of truth. Right. Yeah. Julio, I saw you give a talk recently where you included a really interesting quote from Pablo Picasso, I think in the 1960s sometime.
Yeah, 68.
And he said, computers are useless, they can only give you answers.
Yeah, that's the essence of, 1968 was prehistory in terms of IBM 360 was there. You have to punch programs in cards. But still, AI is a collaborator that becomes as good as the questions that you pose. So in my view, there has to be a renaissance in question abilities that people have, because AI will not do the thinking for you. It will not come up with something completely. Sometimes the best questions already contain the answer. But what is at the root of all of this is AI, for the time being, depends on all the data that they can see. And so one example that I like to give, and I put the word yet just to hedge my pronouncement, is you could fit into AI the entire history of modern Western, the entire history of Western art let's say prior to 1900, and ask where things will go, and you are not going to come up with cubism or abstract expressionism. Or you could fit the entire history of physics prior to 1900, and you're not going to come up with relativity or quantum, because those things violated every assumption that was built into the data before. With those caveats, nevertheless, AI can be amazingly useful in expanding your space, but you have to ask the right questions. And this is why I made a comment. If you outsource your thinking to AI, you'll become increasingly dumber. But if you start using AI as your collaborator, I think that synergy will produce better and better possibilities, in my view.
Mm-hmm. That's a great bridge to the third level, which is advice. I'll return to Brian to talk about this some more because, building on what Julio said, I think the point with this layer is learning how to think better, not what to think, but how to think better. So can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. This brings us to the top of the pyramid. And, Julio is exactly right. You're looking for a way to collaborate best with the bot, and you want to know how you make collaboration most profound with this new technology. And that's really what the advice level is all about. And in a nutshell, we kind of turn everything upside down that we've talked about already, in that you don't want to ask the bot for answers. You want to ask the bot how to think better about approaching a problem. You want to ask it for advice on how to solve a problem. Don't solve the problem for me. And there is a way to, very quickly describe how profound this change in orientation can be when you get to this level of the bot. I do an experiment in my class where I have everybody take a creativity test. Creativity test is very straightforward. You got to come up with 10 words that are as different as possible from one another. And it's a very hard test. So like your first two words could be very far apart, but when you add the third word, you get far away from word number one, but much closer to word number two. And so working through that optimization problem really helps you reveal people's underlying ability to be creative. So everybody in the room takes the creativity test, and then I give them the option to have the bot take the creativity test for them. And I polled the class, how many of you think the bot's going to do better than you? And to what Julio just said, that the bot has like all human knowledge in it. Everybody in the room is like, hey man, the bot is just going to, kill me on this. It's going to be so much better. So then they choose a bot, they have the bot do it for them, and they get their scores. Now, do you think that they do better, worse, or the same as the bot? On average, there's no difference between the bot's average answer and the class's answer. The bot actually just gives mediocre answers. Why? Because it's trained on us and our averages. That is the kind of shift in orientation that people have to make as they start to begin to use and collaborate with the bot. To make things worse, I also give them the chance to collaborate with the bot. Let the bot give you 10 words, and then you could go in and change the ones you want to increase your score. And when you see that, that's when you see the second problem at this level, which is that people basically defer to the answer of the bot and make very few changes. And in the end, they don't do any better. So what you're looking for at this level is to keep in mind that if you want to do something creative, if you want to boost your innovativeness, you've got to ask the bot not for answers, but for how to do it better, so that you can then introduce, your own special sauce, your own colors. And that integration is what makes collaboration most profound.
Excellent. So Matt, this is obviously the most ambitious goal of working with AI, the most challenging. Where are we starting to see early examples of this happening out in the world?
Yeah, so I think there's actually a lot of spaces. So I think one example where organizations have been effectively adopting AI is training sales folks. And so it turns out that there's a wide variety of skills across a sales team. Some people just get the most sales, and some people are struggling hard. And it's not always because of how much effort they're putting in. Some people are putting a lot of effort but just not getting the return. And it might be because They just don't have the skills yet. And so you can actually train people with AI systems. And it's been taking like the kind of things that the top salespeople do, identify that from recording their conversations, summarizing what those conversations are, all with AI, and then saying, here's the moments in time when you want to say these kind of things. And so that can be a just-in-time intervention where literally while you're having a conversation with your client, on your screen you see pop up different things to say. But not always are we selling to clients in this kind of situation where we could have like a little cheat sheet in front of us. And so role-playing games are actually really effective. And so that's actually something my lab is working on right now. We're not looking in the sales space, though the sales space is something we might consider in the future. But we're actually looking at something a bit bigger than that. And we are looking at empathic communication. So specifically, how can you communicate such that your audience feels heard, validated, and understood? And the reason we're doing this is something that Julio was referring to earlier. Leadership is all about making decisions. And when you're making decisions, often it's decisions that are kind of hard because not everyone agrees with you, right? That's like part of leadership is not everyone's going to agree with what you're doing. But if you can communicate in such a way such that the people who don't necessarily agree with you still feel respected and heard and validated, you can really go far. And so it turns out that, at least with respect to when someone's sharing a trouble, whether it's getting laid off for a job or getting passed over for promotion or a family member passing away, there are actually kind of playbook things in the active listening space that you should do, and there's things that you shouldn't do. Okay, I don't need to go into all the details about it, but the key with that is, given that there's actually a good playbook, you'll find it in something like 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, what active listening is, we can instantiate that in an AI such that AI coaching can give you personalized advice when you practice with someone. Now, you're like, well, where can I practice with someone? Well, actually, you could practice with an AI. And so we've built a platform, and I'll share the link with you afterwards so you can put it in the YouTube description. But basically, you can come to this, you practice responding to someone, AI agent that shares a trouble. After 5 minutes, you get coaching advice, and you can do it again and again and again. And we've done this now with over 1,000 people, we found that this can significantly increase people's ability to communicate such that others feel heard. So this is research that we have not yet published, but will be coming out relatively soon. So this is where I see like one of the biggest opportunities, actually upskilling people in like communication.
Mm-hmm. Yep, research coming soon to Kellogg Insight as well. We'll have an article on that very soon. Before we move on to Julio's answer, I just want to say thank you to Brian. Brian needs to leave us a little early today to go teach a class. So that takes priority over our webinars. So thank you, Brian, for participating.
Thank you.
We still
Bye-bye.
have minutes left with Julio and Matt to answer some more questions from the audience and from myself. Julio, before we move into audience questions, it seems like this advice layer really touches on how AI can enhance human creativity instead of replacing human creativity. So I wonder, can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so before I go into that, let me add another component of AI. At some point, I don't know who may be doing this. I know at least one example on the art side. I think it was David Salle, a pretty famous painter. He worked for a year with someone who was the interface in between him and AI. And basically what he wanted was AI to paint like him, multiply him, make him more effective. And in some cases, some people who are really at the top of the game and complete control of, they would like to have like a digital twin that thinks like them and that thinks like them, okay? But this was an example on the art side, okay? So when AI sort of bubble up, some of the first examples were on art, because art is supposed to be creative. And the examples were along the lines of, look at this AI. By the way, if you use AI, I always use 3 different kinds and see how they give me different answers. But in this case was one. Look at what it produced. This painting looks like a Mark Rothko, and we tested this with museum curators and critics, and this is amazing. They cannot distinguish it from the real thing. That's a bad example. Mark Rothko happened. There is no other place for another Mark Rothko. That's not creativity in art. In art, you have to create your own DNA, your own space. So the problem is, how do you, in creativity, there are ideas that are big, okay? They are big because they solve something that was an empty space in the domain of knowledge. You can put it there, expand the domain. Sometimes they are big enough that they push the boundary of the domain. Sometimes they kind of break through the boundary. That's what I call breakthrough. But at the highest level of creativity is what I will call a break with. Is everybody was thinking in this particular way because every idea was anchored in this mode of thinking, and somehow you come with something that opens a new domain, okay? That's really tough. But the only way to get there is to move your favorite AI system to a point in which those things become possible. But conventional questions will never, ever produce a break with. Everything will be a melange, a mix, for example, in art, of every painting ever produced by Rothko, and he will produce another one that looks like him, but is not distinctive enough. So the question is, how do you break with the assumptions of a given domain? Because those are the ones that they break with, the ones that produce something so uniquely creative that opens a new, completely domain. Mm-hmm. Okay? The internet did that for us. And if you're looking, I don't know, 100 years before 1970, you'll never imagine that because it was not in the space of things that people are thinking about. But break with are the things that drive everything in humanity, the big, big things. Mm-hmm. And the only way to get there is by really cultivating the art of asking really good questions. The kind of questions that contain almost the answer. And what you want is a refinement of the idea. But I think we have to teach more that, the art of asking questions.
Mm-hmm. I want to use the last 10 minutes here on some audience questions, which I believe are from genuine humans, not AI, but who knows. I have a good one here that is about what does success look like? So when an organization launches an AI initiative, you mentioned Amazon and cost saving or time savings, but are there bigger versions of success that organizations should be looking for as they're assessing how well these things worked?
Well, at the basic level, when you use AI to do something that you're already doing, you have a metric and you compare the old metric with a new metric. But if you start doing more revolutionary things, I think some of the metrics are yet to be developed, really. Because the biggest applications will change something that is extremely hard to quantify, and is the culture of a place. And I don't know what metrics you'll use for that off the top of my head, because it's very hard to, culture is the hardest thing to measure. And when you change things, it probably things that connected with culture are the first things to go, because you don't know how to put a number to that. But at the end of the day, that would be the biggest changes in any implementation of AI within an organization. Mm-hmm. I have no idea what more to add to this really. Because it's
Matt, when we talked about your empathic communication paper, one thing that jumped out to me was you don't necessarily want the AI to be as good as a human, right? Like that isn't the right measuring stick to think about AI effectiveness.
Well, this is where it gets really interesting is sometimes your measurements might show that AI is more effective than a human depending on how you measure it. So if you're just saying this text response that came from an AI versus this text response that came from a human, and you don't say what it came from, then people are often going to prefer the text from the AI, so to speak. And they might even say, if you told them it's AI and human, they might still say, I like the AI one. But when people are actually interacting with other folks in person, there's lots of evidence that that shared reality of us just being in the same spot, you being there for me, and you then having a memory in the future of that situation actually matters. Now, not everyone necessarily feels this way. We have individual differences. People are not all the same, but in general, people still prefer that. And so asking the right question, as Julio's getting at, really matters, and answering it with the right metrics. Sometimes we can have metrics that are too narrow that then make us think that we're succeeding. Oh, AI can just replace all our customer service. No, actually, maybe the relationships that customer service agents were building with your clients really mattered in getting people to stay on the platform. And so making sure that you have a very broad view of what those metrics are going to be important for making sure that what masks as success isn't some kind of like failure later on.
Of course, in the area of counseling, that's one of the most legally contested things now. I did a fireside chat in the law school maybe a couple of months ago, and with the former dean there of the law school. I thought maybe there will be 30 lawyers or students. The place was full. And the issue now is how law can get ahead of AI. I mean, because the way that things are, you are playing catch up. And in almost all of these areas, the legal implications are enormous. So maybe you can have laws that have some like contracts that if this happens, then this is deployed in there. But a lot of things that we need to guide the processing remain to be invented, really. Like metrics, you ask for metrics. We don't have those there.
I fear this might be another one that hasn't been invented yet, but I'll ask anyway. A lot of questions about how do you train people? So how do you train people to ask better questions like you were talking about? Or how do you train people to grow and develop prompting skills, critical questioning when using LLMs? What sort of successes have there been in that space?
Something that was in my mind recently is a bad example of AI, okay? So I distinguish between systems that are complicated, like an old airplane was complicated. It has to, you put it together with one design, every piece has to do what it's designed to do, and the pilot is there to make this mechanical device do what the pilot wants it to do, okay? But I don't know if many people will remember the case of this 737 MAX. Boeing had to react quickly because Airbus came with a new plane, single aisle, and Boeing was doing well. They had designed the Dreamliner, but they did not have a plane in this space, okay? So they decided to retrofit one. They had to put new engines, more effective to match the Airbus engines. That changed the aerodynamics of the plane. Maybe the landing gear would have to change. They didn't do that. So the operating conditions for the plane were different. However, if you put this piece of software, the plane will behave exactly like the old 737, and you didn't have to retrain pilots. Now, that software would respond to signals, and what was never anticipated is that one sensor that will trigger something in this piece of software failed. And when it failed, because the plane was reaching some angle that was not, the pilot tried to do something, but the software, not knowing that the thing had failed, did the opposite, and there were 2 successive crashes in Indonesia and in Ethiopia. So the point is, if there is AI anywhere and is hidden from view, you really have to think about consequences, like when the system becomes complicated as opposed to complex. A complex system is one in which the things think on their own, outside human intervention. And I can see so many possibilities where things go way beyond the 737 MAX, that that's something that should be really thought very carefully.
Matt, do you have any ideas for training people on asking the right questions?
Yeah. So I'll say first, it boils down to curiosity. But then how do you instill curiosity? And I should say why this problem is harder than, and the problem being, consultants used to deploy new technologies like Workday in some new kind of company, and then you'd have a consultant from Deloitte going in and teaching people at this new organization how to like integrate Workday into their systems. There's a specific thing that solved a specific problem. Large language models today, the Gemini, Claudes, ChatGPTs of the world, are general purpose problem solvers. They can't solve everything, but they're general purpose in all the examples that Julio said at the very start. And so what I do in my classes is try to provoke surprise and awe among the students, so they think, oh, I never thought that way. By thinking, I've never thought that way, Matt's showing me these things, I can discover these things also for myself. You don't necessarily need to get a PhD to be interested in curiosity. In fact, like I have a 1.5-year-old, and let me tell you how curious she is. She's the most curious human being I've ever seen in my life. But curiosity is inherent to who we are. When you think back about your inner child, who you were at 5, 6 years old, a lot of times you think about curiosity for the kind of professions you want to explore and all that kind of stuff. And sometimes as adults, we tamper our curiosity. And I think that's actually a big problem in addressing stuff in the workforce, is people aren't engaged in their curiosity because they're busy with all the things, picking up from daycare or whatever else. But if you make time for curiosity, then you allow for skill building, you allow for creativity, and you allow, and part of this automation aspect is allowing for that extra time so people can reorient to the world. And we just need to give space for that reorientation, which comes from a drive, and that drive has to be curiosity.
But curiosity is probably I think I can teach people how to be more creative, but it's very hard to teach people how to be more curious. It's as if we all start with high levels of curiosity, and then as we go, even as we get educated, we are kind of bounded within lines that we don't see, but curiosity diminishes. We get too comfortable in knowing spaces well, and we don't explore things in neighboring spaces. But the ability to explore neighboring spaces, in my view, is central to the questions that we can ask that are outside the norms of the space that you kind of inhabit. And that's the only way to come up with new ideas, is to break from those boundaries. So curiosity is at the very core of all of this, in my view.
Well, I am curious to ask all of the great questions we have here, but we ran out of time, unfortunately. So I want to say thank you to Julio, thank you to Matt, thank you to Brian, who has already left us, but maybe he'll watch the video later. And thank you to the audience for attending today and for providing us with so many great topics and questions. We're going to try and get some of these answered for Insight articles, I think, over the next few months. As I mentioned, this is the last webinar for 2025, but please do sign up for the newsletter to hear about our 2026 lineup. We should be announcing the first one that is going to be in January in just the coming days. So that's all for today. I wish you all a safe and happy holidays, and we'll see you next time.